Hello, my friends. So, welcome to the Pastor's Chat for today, February the 3rd. It's Wednesday, and the snow still dominates my life, but in a good way. So how are you today, my friends? Come on in, have a seat. I wish I could serve you a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. We could light a fire in the fireplace that's not here. And, yes, sit back, take a moment. My grandfather on my dad's side, who was Scotch-Irish German, had a religion beyond Presbyterianism. And it was every afternoon, every single afternoon, he took a nap. I don't know, he's not Mexican, but you could call it a siesta. But to him, it was religion. He would come in from working in the morning. Sometimes we would finish up, and my grandmother would have a big noontime meal. That was our hot meal. And we would eat, and then he would, at 1:30, he would go up the winding pie stairs to a bedroom in the back, what they called the back room, and he would lay down and he would take a nap. And he would nap. And it was usually for half an hour. It wasn't, sometimes maybe a little longer than that, but he would sleep. And so maybe, around 2 o'clock, maybe that's why I yawn. It's hereditary around 2. I could take a nap. I enjoy naps, but they're power naps for me. I fall asleep immediately, and I'll sleep for 10 minutes, and I wake up, and I'm refreshed. It's always been a part of my life. I always have done that. So anyway, here we are at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't know, Pastor's Chat's not quite a nap, but it's a break. It's a chance to stop, take an assessment, listen maybe to some thoughts and ideas that take you out of the drumbeat of the ordinary things of life, washing dishes and laundry and paying bills and shoveling sidewalks and all the rest of things that go along with the regular rhythm of life, eating, cleaning up. We sit and we chat. Welcome. So I'm going to stay on this theme for the entire length of the season of Epiphany. The new ideas that we can uncover. Yesterday, I dabbled a little bit with the notion of things you didn't know about yourself, that you might learn about yourself, the things that difficult times, and in particular, you didn't know the strength that you have. You'd never been tested at a certain level, and you didn't know the strength that you have. So this idea, this discipline of purposefully being open to learning, discovering what you never knew, or relearning again what you knew and forgot to apply, this is the season of Epiphany. It's the weeks after Epiphany. And so once the star has come and has shown its light, we then, living in the light of that, we see things differently. I know Christmas seems like a long time ago, but it's in reference to the Magi and to their arrival and to the light of Christ, and specifically the light that comes into our world from out there, meaning the dimensions of God. Left to ourselves alone, human beings do not have a good track record. We need the light of God. We need it. We don't always know how it comes to us. We don't have a great communication, red-hot phone, but we need the light of God. And this opens the door for a kind of understanding of the Spirit of God. It doesn't really explain it, but this is the gap into which We know that God is with us and guides us, and in some way, we don't know how, the light comes to us. Another one that I talked about this week was that the way things are, the way things are is not necessarily the way they ought to be. I was thinking about how important this teaching of Epiphany and seeing things in a new light is to the reading of Scripture. In the human experience, we struggle for something which is absolutely certain, a truth that never changes. We look for an objective place to set our feet and to, something to stand on, something that never changes. We used to rehearse over and over again the idea that it's God who never changes. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The unchangeableness of God. But in all of that search for that which is constant in life, that doesn't change, I think we've given up in some ways on the quest for that which is new in our minds, that how we understand it changes, how we see the world changes. Now, I know that scientists are human and they don't follow even their own protocols, but one of the reasons I tend to celebrate the kind of truth that science delivers as opposed to the kind of truth that religious communities offer up, and they are two different kinds of truth. One of the reasons I celebrate the truth that comes through science is because ideally, the scientist is always ready to abandon the contemporary way of understanding for evidence of something new. That's refreshing to me. Yes, I'm disappointed that when I went to elementary school and high school, we built the models of the solar system and we thought Pluto was it and Pluto was a planet and we had it all worked out. We had a model that was all set up. And then only to discover now they don't teach that in school anymore because A, they're not sure Pluto is a planet at all. Pluto doesn't qualify. And by the way, there seem to be two other objects somewhere between the outer reaches closer than Pluto that look like they would qualify for planets if Pluto does. What? What about truth that doesn't change? What about certainty? What about things I can be sure of? Ideally, science says, reminds every scientist that you work not with facts, but you work with hypotheses. And then you try to discover things that either prove or sometimes, and almost always, will eventually disprove your hypothesis. You do experiments. You try to get reproducible events. That's as close as science comes to facts. Reproducible events, things that it happened that way last time, it happens that way this time, so our understanding of it must be correct. But science, in its very philosophy, is ready to abandon the present day understanding for what is yet to be discovered. To me, that's very Christian. It's very Christian. Because it doesn't change God any, it just changes our understanding. It welcomes a humility to us and the way we understand the world. This is the great drama of our, the very unsettling things about human sexuality. That there's a range of people's sexual orientation, that human beings exist somewhere on a range of their attraction, a male's attraction to females. In some males, it's total, 100%, no attraction otherwise. But to most of us, if we can get past our denial, we have similar feelings. We just suppress them because it's so damn scary in a heterosexual society to ever even acknowledge that you may be a little a little drawn to someone of the same sex. Unthinkable. That can't be talked about. In the world I grew up in, there were girls' clothes and boys' clothes. And you never put boys' clothes on girls or girls' clothes on boys because you would cause confusion of identity around what sex they are. We know better than that now. We know that's just not how it's done. That's not how it's formed. And little boys now play with dolls because it helps to further develop all of them. And some of them, some little boys, they say about 10% of boys, will grow up and find their natural sexual attraction is to the same sex. What? Shocking. And how are we to think about that? Well, we have to have the categories to put it in. We didn't know that a person's sexual attraction is like their fingerprint. A fingerprint, no, what I meant to say is their orientation is a good word, because if you're right-handed, you're right-hand oriented, and if you're left-handed, you're left-hand oriented. It's a given. It's a given. And, I went to Delaware Township School in Delaware Township, New Jersey. And I had an English teacher who was hell-bent on eradicating all left-handed writing from her English composition class. They were just starting to put left-handed seats in the classrooms where the writing arm would come around from the left to support a left-hander. She removed them. She wasn't have any left-handers in her class because she saw them as, I don't know, that's the sign that's going to be a bad kid. You had to break them of that. I think also the rumors about it were that those were spoiled kids. They just weren't taught to write the correct way. Well, try that on a left-hander today. Some people can bat left-handed and right-handed, ambidextrous. We just know that's how the world is made now. And we give ourselves, in the season of Epiphany, we give ourselves, I know it causes anxiety. I know you feel like the ground is shaking underneath you, and you don't, then you have all these responses, right? They come to us naturally somehow with change. But we also then can relax and realize that the way we see the world today, things that we accept as true today, would shock the heck out of people, human beings who lived and thought they had their feet firmly on the ground in a real understanding of how the world works and how God works and what's expected of us and what good people are and what bad people are. Oh my goodness, 100 years. In the season of Epiphany, we want to be people who are moving through time with God. And it doesn't even have to be that God is changing. It's that we are limited. Our knowing, our understanding is extremely limited. Eve and Adam, they had a paradise, but it did not involve knowing everything. It didn't. It didn't involve knowing the future. It didn't even involve being able to see completely into the present moment. And it certainly didn't involve knowing a way to fix the mistakes of the past. There's so much of life which involves for now. I told you this before. I think that one of the ways to describing the discernment of God's will for what is really the mainstream Presbyterian church is that we don't like to talk about it much because it feels weird, but that we discern God's will for now until new evidence comes along. And this shapes how we read the Bible. It shapes how we understand ourselves. It shapes how we do church. We're no different than anybody else. We don't find it any easier to welcome the new information. Poor Pluto. We don't. we still, in the spirit of being alive in the world and in discovery of the world and wanting the truth to be the truth, to know it as it actually is. The assumptions that we have made, the things that we thought were rock solid knowing, it just doesn't happen. When I used to teach science to 7th graders, it's simple, but I tried to explain to them it actually was true that for a long period of time, I think it was around the 12th or 13th century, I'm not sure, but human beings believed that things appeared out of nowhere. There was spontaneous generation. They actually believed that things just came into being. They were still just poof, sort of like a fairy would appear in the middle of the air, right? Poof. Or like the leprechauns move in and out of our lives. But one of the things that they were taught was that you could prove spontaneous generation. And the way one of the things that they thought just spontaneously generated in life were mice. They thought they just bang, and there they were. So you would say, well, this was a pre-scientific era. I think we're still pre-scientific because all science tells us is to be ready for the next thing to come, for the next thing to learn. But there was a test. So it was a little bit scientific proof of spontaneous generation. You take a shoebox and you put some rags soaked in olive oil or cooking oil, and you put a little bit of wheat in there as well, and then put the shoebox into a dark corner, and a mouse will appear. It will appear. Poof, spontaneous generation. You can Google it, look it up. It seems silly now, but so will a lot of the way we understand life today seem to people 100 years from now. The season of Epiphany is a great discipline for us in our journey. Don't get too well grounded in the way things are right now and the way we understand them, because it's only the way we understand it. There's so many infinite number of ways and dimensions to understand life, and we're only just beginning. I'll leave you with this thought. In the beginning of the training for spiritual life with God, when Abraham and Sarah were first beginning to walk with God, they were nomadic. They didn't have foundations in their homes. They didn't have their homes were all movable. They were tents. But they were tents in the desert. And there was a warning. It was a spiritual warning as well as a practical warning that when they moved into a new section of the wilderness, or where they were going to camp for a couple of weeks, they would drive tent stakes, these steel or big wooden stakes, way down into the sand, so that when the wind blew, the tents would stay up and they would have a semi-permanent dwelling. But the spiritual wisdom and the practical wisdom was, don't drive your tent stakes too deep. Don't drive your tent stakes too deep. You could look it up. It's there in the primary wisdom of God in how to navigate this journey with God in the world. Don't drive your tent stakes too deep, because the time is going to come where you're going to have to move, and you can't stay here. You can't stay where you are. So, my friends, I'm going to leave it at that. If you were here, we'd talk a little bit more about how it lands for you. Send me those emails. I'd love to get the responses in the comments, and I write back. I do, especially if you leave an opening for me to do it. But I'm glad you came by for a chat today. Maybe, just maybe, when this COVID disaster is over, we'll have a time to actually sit in the same room, and that you'll come and sit in this chair, and you can then chat at me. God bless you, my friends. I love you. I care about you. And I'll see you tomorrow. When we come back together, it'll be Thursday. God bless you.